police had already searched the farm once before, combing through every inch of the property. However, their initial search turned up nothing incriminating. But now, investigators were back, this time armed with precise knowledge of where the evidence had been destroyed. They sifted through layers of dirt and charred evidence, carefully examining the ashes and debris. Even without a body, the investigators finally uncovered the undeniable proof they needed. By this time, the results of forensic lab tests on DNA samples recovered from the farm had come back. The findings confirmed what detectives had long suspected. The unidentified DNA profile found at the crime scene belonged to Kelsey Berreth. Dear viewers, please don't forget to like, leave a comment under the video, and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new videos. This is very important to us. Today, we're diving into true crime and taking a closer look at the documentary about Kelsey Berreth's case. She was born on September 15, 1989, in the quiet farming town of Moses Lake, Washington. Raised in a rural setting, she spent her childhood on a sprawling family farm alongside her parents and older brother, immersed in the daily rhythms of agricultural life. From an early age, Kelsey displayed a strong work ethic, eagerly helping with everything from tending crops to caring for livestock. However, while she enjoyed the farm work, her true fascination lay elsewhere, in the sky above. She was mesmerized by the crop-dusting planes that soared over their fields, the small aircraft skillfully maneuvering through the air to spray fertilizers or disperse seeds. The idea of flying, of controlling such a powerful machine, captivated her imagination. From that moment on, Kelsey knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life. Determined to pursue her dream, Kelsey worked tirelessly through high school, excelling in her studies while continuing to help on the farm. Upon graduation, she wasted no time and immediately enrolled in a local aviation program, setting her sights on becoming a pilot. The rigorous training was demanding, but she thrived under the challenge, displaying a natural talent for flying. After earning her pilot's license, she secured a job as a flight instructor, sharing her knowledge and passion with aspiring pilots. Though her career kept her occupied, she remained devoted to her family, frequently visiting the farm to lend a hand. But amidst her busy schedule, another dream lingered in her heart. She longed for a family of her own, a home filled with love, laughter, and children. By the time she reached 27, Kelsey felt ready to start building that life. In 2016, she turned to the internet in hopes of finding a meaningful connection. That's when she met Patrick, a man whose background mirrored her own. He was a farmer, hardworking and dedicated to the land. And, like Kelsey, he dreamed of having a big family. Their connection was instant, their conversations stretching late into the night as they shared their hopes, their pasts, and their visions for the future. After months of talking, Kelsey made a life-changing decision. She would move to Colorado to be with Patrick. Their relationship had blossomed into something serious, and before long, they were engaged. Shortly after settling into her new life in Colorado, Kelsey secured a position as a flight instructor at an esteemed aviation school that specialized in training military pilots. It was a prestigious opportunity, one that promised career advancement and professional fulfillment. However, the job was located in a different city, about 70 miles away from Patrick's farm. To manage the long commute, Kelsey decided to rent an apartment in a nearby town called Woodland Park. Though the distance meant they couldn't live together full-time, they remained deeply committed to one another, spending every moment they could together. Their love story was unfolding quickly, and within a year, it seemed as though Kelsey had everything she had ever wanted. In early 2017, Kelsey discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy. This was the family she had always dreamed of. A few months later, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and for a while, life felt perfect. She and Patrick settled into their roles as parents, and despite the challenges of balancing work and motherhood, Kelsey felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. But soon, subtle cracks began to appear in their relationship. Patrick grew distant, his once affectionate and engaged demeanor shifting into something cold and detached. He no longer seemed excited about their life together, his interactions with Kelsey becoming sporadic and unenthusiastic. She sensed him pulling away, and though she was unsure of the cause, she was unwilling to let go. Determined to salvage their relationship, she made every effort to reconnect with him, hoping that whatever was wrong could be mended. By the time Thanksgiving of 2018 arrived, things between them had grown even more strained. Nevertheless, Kelsey remained hopeful. She planned to cook a special Thanksgiving dinner and called her mother that morning, sharing her excitement about the meal she intended to prepare. During their conversation, she casually mentioned that she was heading to the grocery store to pick up some last-minute ingredients. It was an ordinary, cheerful conversation. Nothing seemed amiss. In the days that followed, Kelsey sent a few text messages to her mother, simple updates about her plans and her baby girl. But then, suddenly, the messages stopped. At first, her mother didn't think much of it. Kelsey was a busy woman. Between her job and taking care of a 1-year-old, it was understandable that she might not have time to respond immediately. But as the hours turned to days and her phone remained eerily silent, unease crept in. A full week had passed without a single call or text from Kelsey, and now her mother was truly worried. Desperate for reassurance, she reached out to Kelsey's older brother, hoping he had heard from her. But he too had received no response. Concern quickly turned to fear. Something wasn't right. Frantic for answers, Kelsey's mother decided to contact Patrick. If anyone knew what was going on, it would be him. When she finally got a hold of him, his response only deepened the mystery. He claimed that he and Kelsey had broken up. According to Patrick, Kelsey had decided to end their relationship before Thanksgiving. He insisted that on the morning of the holiday, she had dropped off their daughter at his farm, taken some of her belongings, and walked out of his life for good. He claimed he hadn't heard from her since. Kelsey's mother struggled to believe his story. None of it made sense. For one, she couldn't imagine her daughter abandoning her child without so much as a phone call. Kelsey adored her baby. She would never simply vanish. And second, she had spoken to Kelsey on Thanksgiving morning. Her daughter had been in good spirits, excited about cooking dinner, and had given no indication that she was planning to leave. If she had truly decided to break things off with Patrick, why wouldn't she have mentioned it? Why would she pretend everything was normal? Feeling a rising sense of dread, Kelsey's mother pleaded with Patrick to check on her at her home. He agreed, but said he needed to finish up some work on the farm first. But the call never came. Days passed, stretching into an agonizing silence that gnawed at Kelsey's mother. A terrible sense of unease settled over her, and she knew, deep in her gut, that something was terribly wrong. Unable to ignore the growing dread any longer, she made a decision that would set the wheels of an investigation in motion. She called the police. She detailed every concern, explained how out of character this was for her daughter, and pleaded for them to check on her. The local department responded, sending an officer to Kelsey's home. Upon arrival, they found her car parked outside, its presence both reassuring and deeply unsettling. But there was no sign of Kelsey. The officer knocked, waited, and listened. Yet the house remained eerily silent. Since there was no response and they lacked a warrant, they were unable to enter. All they could do was report back to Kelsey's mother that her daughter simply wasn't there. It was a frustrating dead end, but it was just the beginning of a much darker mystery. In an effort to piece together what had happened, officers reached out to Patrick. His story remained consistent. He insisted that Kelsey had told him she needed space and had left. However, this time, he added a new, troubling detail. According to him, before leaving, Kelsey had taken some of her belongings from his house, including a handgun. He painted a picture of a woman who had been acting strangely in the days leading up to her disappearance, subtly implying that she might have been struggling mentally. He claimed he was genuinely worried that she might have done something drastic. Suspicion was mounting, and detectives needed answers. They obtained access to Kelsey's home, and what they found inside only deepened the mystery. Nearly all of her belongings remained untouched. Her clothes, important documents, toiletries, everything a person would take if they were planning to leave. But one crucial item was missing: her car keys. It made no sense. Why would Kelsey take her keys but leave her car behind? The contradiction was glaring, and investigators knew they needed to dig deeper. With this mounting evidence, law enforcement escalated the case, officially launching a missing person investigation. One of their first steps was obtaining Kelsey's phone records to track her last known location. The data they retrieved was baffling. The last recorded signal from her phone came from a small, obscure town called Gooding, located nearly 800 miles away in Idaho. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. When investigators spoke to Kelsey's family, they confirmed what police had already suspected. Kelsey had no connections to Gooding. No family, no friends, no acquaintances. She had never even mentioned the town. It was an inexplicable anomaly, one that made little sense. Officers contacted the local authorities in Idaho, requesting assistance in the search. They canvassed the area, questioned residents, and combed through security footage from nearby businesses. But no one had seen Kelsey. In a town that small, a new face would have been noticeable. Yet there were no reported sightings. It was as if she had never been there at all. The dead end forced detectives to refocus their efforts. Determined to retrace Kelsey's last known movements, police reviewed CCTV footage from the grocery store she had visited on Thanksgiving. The video captured her moving through the aisles with a calm demeanor. She appeared normal, unhurried, undistressed, completely in control. She picked out ingredients for dinner, browsed the shelves, and even bought a single flower before heading to the checkout. There was nothing to suggest she was planning to disappear or that she was under any sort of duress. To investigators, it was clear. Kelsey had intended to return home that night, but she never did. As days turned into weeks without any breakthroughs, Kelsey's family took matters into their own hands. Her mother and older brother flew to Colorado, determined to find her. They moved into her home, hoping that being close to her surroundings might provide them with some sort of insight. Almost immediately, Kelsey's mother was struck by an unshakable feeling that something wasn't right. The house felt off, subtly, indescribably wrong. Then, one day, Kelsey's brother noticed something unusual. He had gone to use the bathroom when a small smear of red on the inside of the toilet caught his eye. It was faint, almost unnoticeable, but something about it unsettled him. Leaning in closer, he examined it carefully. A chill ran through him as he realized what it could be. He wasted no time. He contacted the police immediately. Authorities arrived and conducted a preliminary test. Their worst fears were confirmed. It was human blood. But that was just the beginning. Detectives realized their initial search had been too superficial. This time, they decided to use luminol, a chemical agent that reveals blood traces even if they have been meticulously cleaned. As the investigators sprayed the chemical, the room told a horrifying story. The bathroom walls and floors lit up in a chilling display. There had been blood everywhere. Though the surface appeared clean to the naked eye, the luminol exposed the unmistakable traces of a crime scene. The same test was performed in the living room, yielding even more disturbing results. Large, smeared stains of wiped away glowed under the chemical reaction, revealing a scene that had been erased from sight. Forensic samples were collected and sent to the lab. When the results returned, they confirmed the grim reality everyone had feared but no one wanted to accept. The blood belonged to Kelsey. But there was something else among the forensic evidence, something that deepened the mystery further. In addition to Kelsey's blood, investigators uncovered 2 additional DNA profiles. One belonged to a man, the other to a woman. The discovery sent a shockwave through the investigation. Who were these 2 unidentified individuals? What were they doing in Kelsey's home? And, most importantly, what role did they play in her disappearance? At this point, detectives were all but certain that Kelsey was no longer alive. Their investigation shifted focus, from a missing persons case to a probable homicide. The priority now was identifying the two unknown individuals whose DNA had surfaced in Kelsey's home. Naturally, Patrick, as the last person known to have seen her, became their prime suspect. Investigators had already been skeptical of Patrick's account of events. His narrative had inconsistencies, and his casual attitude toward Kelsey's sudden disappearance struck them as unusual. Now that they strongly suspected she had been murdered, their doubts about him only intensified. When they obtained access to Patrick's phone records, they found something that stood out. He had continued texting and calling Kelsey's phone up until November 25th, the same day she had stopped responding to everyone else. At first glance, the messages between them seemed ordinary, mostly revolving around their breakup. There were no direct admissions of guilt, no glaringly incriminating details. However, detectives were already questioning the timeline of events. According to Patrick's version of events, Kelsey had left him on Thanksgiving Day, November 22nd. But something about that date didn't sit right with investigators. There was no credible proof that she had been alive in the days following Thanksgiving. No eyewitness accounts, no surveillance footage, and, most disturbingly, no personal activity from Kelsey herself. Her social media accounts had fallen silent. She hadn't contacted her family. Her bank account remained untouched. This raised a terrifying possibility. Kelsey might have been murdered the very night she was last seen. If that was true, then someone had been using her phone to send those messages after her death, possibly as a way to create a false timeline. As detectives combed through Patrick's call records, they noticed something peculiar. He had repeatedly contacted a phone number with a Gooding, Idaho area code both before and after Kelsey's disappearance. Curious to find out more, they traced the number back to a woman named Crystal. She wasn't just some random contact. She was someone who appeared to have a deeper connection to Patrick. Investigators reached out to Crystal and asked how she knew him. She was cooperative at first, explaining that they were business partners who co-owned several horses. But when asked about her last interaction with Patrick, her answers became less straightforward. Initially, she claimed she couldn't remember, but after a long pause, she admitted they had planned to meet shortly after Thanksgiving. According to her, Patrick had asked her to come to Colorado so they could purchase another horse. However, as she was driving there, he informed her that he didn't have enough money to complete the transaction, so she turned around and went back home. This explanation immediately raised red flags. The drive from her town to Patrick's farm was nearly 1,000 miles, a grueling, multi-day journey. It seemed highly improbable that someone would embark on such an exhausting trip just to look at a horse. And then there was another odd detail. Crystal told investigators that she hadn't even used her own vehicle for the trip. Instead, she had borrowed a friend's car, claiming that it was more fuel efficient. This struck detectives as an unnecessary detail, almost as if she was trying to preemptively explain why her own car wouldn't appear on any traffic cameras or toll booth records along the route. Before ending the conversation, detectives asked Crystal a seemingly simple question. Had she ever met Kelsey? Her response was immediate. She claimed she had never met Kelsey in person, but had heard about her on the news. That answer set off alarm bells. At that point in the investigation, Kelsey's case had not yet received widespread national attention. Media coverage was largely local, focused on Colorado. So how had Crystal, who lived in another state, already heard about it? With this new development, investigators decided to take a closer look at Crystal's background. As they dug into her history, they found something that made her even more suspicious. She had recently gone through a divorce. Hoping to gain more insight into her character, detectives reached out to her ex-husband. What he revealed completely contradicted Crystal's claims. According to her ex-husband, Crystal and Patrick had known each other since 2006. They weren't just casual business partners. They had a long history together. Patrick had actually been Crystal's first love, and their relationship had continued on and off for years. Even more damning, he revealed that their romantic involvement had never truly ended, not even after he and Crystal got married. He claimed that Crystal had been secretly seeing Patrick well into 2017, the same year Patrick got engaged to Kelsey. But that wasn't the only lie Crystal had told. Her ex-husband also disclosed that she had lied about her whereabouts after Thanksgiving. At first, she told him that from November 24th to 25th, she had been visiting friends. But when detectives reached out to her, her story changed. She finally admitted to her ex-husband that she had actually been in Colorado during that time. Then, another troubling piece of information surfaced. On December 4th, just days after Kelsey had disappeared, Crystal asked her ex-husband to accompany her to buy a new phone. She claimed that she had lost hers. Detectives immediately took note of the chilling timing. December 4th was the exact same day they had obtained Patrick's phone for investigation. This detail, coupled with Crystal's sudden need for a new device, made investigators even more suspicious. Was she trying to erase potential evidence? Was she worried that her communications with Patrick might incriminate her? With all the evidence mounting, investigators had enough probable cause to obtain a warrant for Crystal's DNA. They flew to Idaho to collect the sample, hoping it would confirm their suspicions. When confronted, Crystal complied with the request but made one thing clear: she would not answer any questions. She was done talking. The cold refusal only reinforced detectives' belief that she was deeply involved in Kelsey's disappearance and likely knew far more than she was letting on. While they awaited the lab results, investigators turned their attention to the car Crystal had borrowed for her trip to Colorado. The vehicle belonged to a friend who was more than willing to cooperate. She allowed them to inspect it thoroughly, explaining that she often carried a handgun inside the vehicle for personal safety. When detectives checked the firearm, they found something alarming. One bullet was missing from the magazine. The friend was adamant that when she had lent the car to Crystal, the gun had been fully loaded. She had no idea where the missing bullet had gone. This seemingly minor detail sent a shiver through the investigative team. Investigators soon reached out to another one of Crystal's acquaintances, a woman named Michelle. What she revealed completely turned the case on its head. Michelle disclosed that Crystal had contacted her in late October, just a month before Kelsey vanished, with a shocking confession. Through tears, Crystal had confided something so disturbing that Michelle had struggled to process it at the time. According to Michelle, Crystal allegedly mentioned that Patrick had requested her help in dealing with Kelsey. He reportedly insisted that he couldn't handle the situation himself, as it would be too noticeable. Instead, he needed someone else to take action, believing that Crystal was the right person for the task. Michelle had been horrified. She urged Crystal to go to the police immediately, but Crystal never did. And now, Kelsey was gone. This revelation completely reshaped the investigation. Detectives now strongly believed that both Patrick and Crystal were involved in Kelsey's murder. However, despite the overwhelming circumstantial evidence, they still lacked hard proof. No confirmed DNA results, no concrete physical evidence linking them to a crime scene, and most importantly, no body. Without these elements, bringing charges would be difficult. As investigators continued digging for answers, the case took yet another unexpected turn. Out of the blue, Crystal called them and informed them that she had hired a lawyer and was ready to talk. When detectives met with her, she didn't hesitate. She dropped a bombshell confession. Crystal admitted that Patrick had killed Kelsey and that she had helped him cover it up. She explained that Patrick had been thinking about the incident for months, but his original idea always involved her participation. From the very beginning, he had tried to influence Crystal's perception of Kelsey, suggesting that she was struggling and that distancing from her was the best option. Crystal claimed Patrick had pressured her relentlessly, feeding her lies about Kelsey's supposed behavior. At some point, Crystal agreed to help. 2 months before Kelsey disappeared, they devised their first plan. It was meant to be straightforward. Crystal planned to tamper with Kelsey's favorite coffee by adding a substance that would make her feel unwell. But there was a problem. Crystal and Kelsey had never met. To fix this, they created a cover story. Crystal would pose as a new neighbor, someone who had just moved to the area and wanted to introduce herself to the locals. In September, Crystal put the plan into motion. She purchased Kelsey's preferred coffee, drove to her home, and knocked on the door. Kelsey, completely unsuspecting, answered with a warm greeting. They made small talk for a few minutes before Crystal handed her the coffee and casually said goodbye. But there was one major problem. Crystal couldn't go through with it. At the last second, she backed out. She simply wanted to see Kelsey in person, to look her in the eye, and perhaps determine if she truly deserved her fate. And just like that, their first attempt failed. Patrick, however, was relentless. He immediately came up with another plan, one far more brutal. Crystal's new task was to return to Colorado, retrieve a metal pipe that Patrick had set aside for her, and harm Kelsey. She followed through with the first part. She drove nearly 1,000 miles, retrieved the weapon from Patrick's farm, and even parked outside Kelsey's house, ready to complete the mission. But once again, she couldn't do it. She sat in her car for what felt like an eternity, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart racing, and then, in a moment of clarity or weakness, she wasn't sure which, she drove away. Patrick was furious, but he didn't give up. He reworked the plan again. This time, instead of a metal pipe, he left a baseball bat for Crystal to use. The assignment remained the same. Drive to Kelsey's home. Once again, she drove the exhausting distance. Once again, she parked outside Kelsey's house. And once again, she failed. Something inside her simply wouldn't let her cross the final line. According to Crystal's chilling confession, everything unfolded on Thanksgiving afternoon. Kelsey, completely unsuspecting, had no reason to fear Patrick when he arrived at her home that day. He carried with him an air of normalcy, masking the sinister plan he had already set in motion. Holding a small bag, he told her he had brought several holiday-scented candles as a fun way to celebrate the occasion. He suggested they play a lighthearted game. He would blindfold her, and she would have to guess the different scents. The moment Patrick tied the blindfold over her eyes, the facade of playfulness vanished. With calculated precision, he grabbed the baseball bat he had brought with him and, without hesitation, carried out the gruesome attack. Kelsey never saw it coming. He then loaded the container into the trunk of his car as if it were nothing more than cargo. But what he did next was even more disturbing. He went about his day as though nothing had happened. While his relatives gathered around the table, laughing, eating, and enjoying the holiday, Body remained hidden just a few feet away, concealed in the trunk of his car. No one suspected a thing. Patrick acted as if everything was normal, skillfully maintaining his cover. After dinner, Patrick drove to a secluded town called Cripple Creek, where he had already rented a barn in preparation for the next phase of his twisted plan. He left Kelsey there for several days, keeping the situation hidden while he decided what to do next. But he wasn't working alone. That same night, he called Crystal and told her it was time to clean up the mess he had made. Trying to distance herself from any potential evidence, Crystal borrowed a friend's car for the trip. She believed using a different vehicle might throw off investigators if the police ever started looking into her. Before leaving, she gathered an array of cleaning supplies: bleach, gloves, scrub brushes, anything that would help erase the crime. But as she was on the road, Patrick called her again. This time, his instructions were oddly specific. He warned her to be extra careful because he couldn't find one of teeth. He feared it might have flown off during the attack, and the last thing he wanted was for it to turn up somewhere it shouldn't, especially not in front of Kelsey's family. When Crystal finally stepped into Kelsey's home, she was met with a shocking scene. Red stains marked the walls, seeped into the carpet, and even reached the ceiling. The intensity of what had happened in that room was undeniable. She got to work immediately. For over 4 hours, she scrubbed, bleached, and mopped every inch of the crime scene, desperately trying to erase all traces. But some stains were impossible to remove, even with the most potent cleaning chemicals. Feeling overwhelmed, she collected all the soiled items, rags, towels, clothing, and other materials, placed them in garbage bags, and loaded them into her car. When she was finally done, Crystal didn't flee in panic or distress. Instead, she casually stopped at a cafe for a meal before heading to meet Patrick. Her calm demeanor, even after covering up a brutal murder, sent a chilling message to detectives. She had no real remorse. After meeting up, she and Patrick made their next move. They stopped at a gas station where Patrick filled up a canister with gasoline. They then drove to the barn in Cripple Creek, retrieved evidence, and transported them back to Patrick's property. There, under the night sky, they started a fire. Fuel was used to accelerate the process, ensuring that all traces were eliminated. As the flames consumed evidence, Patrick's mother stepped outside. She stood there for a while, observing the fire. Whether she realized what was truly happening remains unknown. Before Crystal left for Idaho, Patrick handed her Kelsey's phone. For the next several days, she took on one last role in the cover-up. She responded to text messages from Kelsey's friends and family, pretending to be her. She kept up the illusion that Kelsey was still alive, skillfully crafting responses that would buy them more time. But eventually, Crystal got rid of the phone, destroying what remained of Kelsey's connection to the outside world. Despite her full participation in covering up, Crystal insisted she hadn't acted of her own free will. She claimed that Patrick had threatened her. She painted herself as a terrified victim who had no choice but to do his bidding. But investigators weren't convinced. Crystal's claims of fear didn't align with her actions. She had numerous opportunities to go to the police, before, during, and after the crime. She could have prevented Kelsey's murder, but she didn't. She had even agreed to kill Kelsey herself on multiple occasions, driving nearly 1,000 miles. And when Patrick finally did it himself, she didn't run. She stayed. She helped him clean up. She disposed of the evidence. She deceived Kelsey's family and friends. At the end of the day, Crystal's confession wasn't motivated by guilt or morality. The truth was far simpler. Her lawyer had advised her to take a plea deal. The deal was shockingly lenient. She would only be charged with a single count of evidence tampering for destroying Kelsey's phone. Despite her detailed confession, police still needed solid physical evidence to bring the case to trial. They had already scoured Patrick's farm once, combing through every inch of the property, but their initial search yielded nothing incriminating. Patrick had been careful, meticulous in covering his tracks. However, with Crystal now cooperating, investigators returned, this time armed with her first-hand knowledge of where evidence had been destroyed. They dug through layers of dirt and charred evidence, meticulously sifting through ash and debris. Despite the lack of a body, investigators finally had the smoking gun they needed. By this time, the lab results from the DNA samples found in Kelsey's home had come back. The results confirmed what detectives had long suspected. The two unidentified profiles recovered from the crime scene belonged to Patrick and Crystal. With nowhere left to hide, Patrick was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. By the time the trial began, investigators had gathered a mountain of evidence against him. One of the most damning pieces came from Patrick's own phone records. Then came another critical detail, one that painted a chilling picture of Patrick's attempts to cover his tracks. After leaving Kelsey's home, his phone records showed that he traveled straight to his farm. But there was one problem. Kelsey's phone traveled with him. He hadn't even bothered to turn it off. By the time the jury deliberated, the verdict was inevitable. The evidence against Patrick was insurmountable. With Crystal's testimony, the phone records, the surveillance footage, and his own incriminating actions, there was no room for doubt. The jury unanimously found Patrick Frazee guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 156 years for his crimes. As for Crystal, her fate was far less severe. Thanks to the plea deal arranged by her lawyer, she received an unbelievably lenient sentence, just 3 years in prison. But in an even more shocking turn, a judge later reduced her sentence to just 18 months, with the possibility of early release after serving only a year.